Alrighty. Any more thoughts, or should we move on?
We can move on. It was great talking All-Star, but there's more NBA action to get to.
Absolutely. Much more NBA action. Here we go. We're throwing it up on the screen right now for our visual audience. What the heck is going on in the NBA right now?
For those players want out and teams aren't letting them. And now we're in these situations like this. Go on with what you're explaining. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. So for anyone who may have been living under a rock or just doesn't follow the NBA, either way it's fine. I don't judge. Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin, and possibly others, Denver might have more knowledge on this than me, but those are the two biggest names that I've heard, are now in situations for one reason or another where they will not be playing for their respective teams, Drummond in Cleveland and Blake in Detroit, because their organizations don't want to play them, more or less. They want to, I'm going to say, protect them from getting hurt. That's about the best spin you can put on it, in my opinion. But I'll let you take it a little way from here and take the lead on this.
Okay. All right. So Andre Drummond was traded from Detroit to Cleveland last season. The thing about Andre Drummond is he has a massive contract, and they're trying to unload that contract because that contract's a hindrance. For our visual people, they can see the tweet on the screen, act on the game, which is actually insane and incredibly true. We did a statistic video on the NBA, and Andre Drummond was number 2 in 2020 games.
Yes.
In the Dwight Howard. So, but nobody talks about it because it's so ineffective. So, Cleveland had also traded in the big James Harden trade. They got Jarrett
Allen. Let's
move forward with him. Yeah, Jarrett Allen. I don't know why I said Jarrett Jack.
All good.
Jarrett Allen. So this is one of those things where they need to dump the contract. They don't want him to get hurt. Maybe someone will pick it up. I read a tweet earlier today too that said that 8 to 10 teams have already inquired about Andre Drummond. So that's a bigger market than I thought he would have. So that's kind of where the Andre Drummond situation is, from my belief.
Yeah. I don't know how much to read into this, because as you can see, our visual audience, there's a unnamed NBA scout who has a quote on Andre Drummond that says he can get you a 30-20 game and that would have no impact on the game. Now, those are pretty gaudy stats to kind of say, hey, like, this guy's impact on the game is meaningless. It's weird, right? Obviously, the center is kind of a dying position, or at least a fringe position in today's NBA. And Andre Drummond isn't particularly adept at doing any of the things that other big men like, Jokic comes to mind. He can stretch the floor, anything like that. Drummond is a traditional big man. And there's nothing wrong with that, because he's very, very good at what he does. There is almost no one who would deny that part of it. It's just that he does, finding a place for him in today's NBA is tough. And that's why you've now seen him ping around from Detroit, where he spent several years, to Cleveland, and now Cleveland wants to get rid of him. Now, the other side of this coin, right, is he was in Detroit when Detroit kind of sucked, and he was in Cleveland this last, year plus whatever, and Cleveland has sucked. So can you really put the fact that he doesn't quote unquote have an impact on the game on completely on him? I think that's a little unfair, to be honest. But it's a very specific role he has to fulfill. So you really need a team that, needs somebody to fit that role. And to be completely honest, the reason that I've heard that they're getting rid of him more than anything else is obviously because Jared Allen is that kind of heir apparent to the true starting center position for Cleveland. And he does most of the things that Andre Drummond can do well, at least on a passable level. Plus, then he has his own, kind of elite skill set. He's a very good shot blocker, more so than Drummond, and can stretch the floor and is just more athletic a little bit in that way. He's not obviously a shooter, but you know what I'm saying. He can at least kind of beat more people off the dribble than somebody like Drummond might be able to. And so that's why, I don't know, I'd kind of feel bad in a way because, again, Drummond is probably one of, well, not even probably, he's probably, top 200 minimum basketball players on earth. And yet somehow he finds himself in this position, and that's a little bit rough.
I wanna make one point before we move on about Andre Drummond. He needs to go to a team where he should have been on the Lakers last year. The way he plays, like up big, protects the rim, he should have been on the Lakers last season. He needs to be on a team where their center is really a focal point of their defense, and going to the rim against Andre Drummond would be a bad idea. So I do agree with you also that giving that NBA scout the kind of quote is kind of misleading because he has played on crappy teams. Guarantee you if he did that on like the Nets or the Lakers right now,
right? Like they'd be winning games. And like the thing that the reason I think that the scout probably said this, right, is he was such a high draft pick and he gets paid so much money, they want him to be the guy, or at least one of the top two guys. And that's just not something that he's really built to truly excel at. He's such an elite, true big man. And I'm going to say it this way, he's in the league at the wrong time. If this was 20 years ago, this dude would be, on one of the all NBA teams, probably like every year.
Agreed.
On the other side on the other case of this, it's Blake Griffin, who's in a kind of similar situation, very different player than Drummond, but in a similar stage in their career, where what they're getting a little bit older. Although, now that I say that, I'm going to take something back. Did I read somewhere that Andre Drummond's only like 27, yet he's been in the league for, I don't know, 9 years or something like that?
That's probably accurate. If I Googled Andre Drummond's age, it's probably 27, 28 years old. So you're saying this man is like getting old in his career.
I forget who they compared him to, but it was I wish I would have saved it. I heard it was either on a podcast I was listening to, or I read it somewhere that he's younger than, I don't remember who the other big man that they compared him to was, but he gets like less acclaim even though he's done like so much more. Yeah, it was just wild, right? Anyway, back to Blake Griffin. He is in a similar situation where his team is kind of shopping him around and has decided to basically shut him down, and they're not playing him, again, for whatever behind the scenes reasons, as well as what they've projected outwardly. And this is just kind of weird because obviously Blake Griffin has been a huge name in the NBA world pretty much the entire time you and I have been, fans of the league.
Yeah, so the thing with Blake Griffin is his contract's actually massive. Like he's making like $27 million this year with a player option for the same amount next year. It's like he's going to make around $50 million over the next couple years. And the Pistons don't want that. But I also really believe that Blake Griffin wants to go somewhere where he is utilized, maybe not in his as best as he can be, because he is still very young. You know, he may be not as athletic as he used to be, as comes with age. But, you know, going somewhere where you want to win, like, that's key. And I think a lot of players have come to that realization over the last 5-10 years, is that going somewhere later in your career to win a championship. Because look, Blake Griffin, for the first like half of last decade, you know, from 2010 to 2015, he was a perennial all-star. Man dunked over a car, for God's sakes. Like, I remember that. Like, he was awesome. And then injuries happened, and then the Steve Ballmer thing happened. You know, I saw Stephen A. Smith say that he needs to apologize to Steve Ballmer so he can go to the Clippers. Nah, you don't need to do that. Like, just things have happened to Blake. So for him to just be like, I want to go somewhere, and even for our visual audience and then our audio audience, it says Blake Griffin to sit out, Pistons mulling trade or buyout options. So they're even willing to have a buyout for something. So poor Blake. I wish him the best. I wish he would come to the Lakers. We could use his presence sometimes. But he deserves to go to a place that he can be successful and used well, and Detroit is just not that place.
I think a big reason too that I've heard is obviously he's evolved his game much more so than Drummond. I've seen several clips from the last couple of years where, you know, Blake Griffin's was capable and probably still is to a point of stepping out and hitting a couple threes a game. However, this season that has dipped dramatically from what I understand. Again, I haven't watched enough NBA this year to fully comment on some of these things, but I'll give the 2 cents based on the information I have, right? And so I think that's a big reason why Detroit needs to move off of this or wants to move off of this. They can't be paying all this money to somebody who now is only fulfilling, you know, 75% or, you know, whatever you want to put on it of what kind of it was promised in a way when they agreed to that contract. And that's just tough because, again, like you were kind of saying, I don't think Blake Griffin's days in the NBA are even close to done. You know, I think he's late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
And so like he still has, you know, a handful of years left minimum, and he's got, again, the athletic ability that he'll find a place somewhere, I'm sure. But it's just a little weird. Now, before we completely move off of this, I want to play a rant that I saw from Draymond Green that addresses this issue, and he brings up what I think is a fairly valid point, and then we'll talk on that. But this is a couple minute video.
To watch Andre Drummond before the game sit on the sideline, then go to the back, and then come out in street clothes because a team is going to trade him is bull. Because when James Harden asked for a trade and essentially dogged it, I don't think there was no surprise or no, you know, there's no one's going to fight back that James was dogging it his last days in Houston. But he was castrated for wanting to go to a different team, and everybody destroyed that man. And yet a team can come out and say, oh, we want to trade a guy, and then that guy is to go sit. And if he doesn't stay professional, then he's a cancer, and he's not good in someone's locker room, and he's the issue. And we've seen situations of Harrison Barnes getting pulled off the bench. You know, DeMarcus Cousins finding out that he's traded in an interview after the All-Star game. And we continue to let this happen. But I got fined for stating my opinion of what I thought should happen with another player. But teams can come out and continue to say, oh, we're trading guys, we're not playing you. And yet we're to stay professional. At some point, as players, we need to be treated with the same respect and have the same rights that the team can have. Because as a player, you're the worst person in the world when you want a different situation. But a team can say they're trading you, and that man is to stay in shape. He is to stay professional, and if not, his career is on the line. At some point, this league has to protect the players from embarrassment like that. You know, we talk all of this stuff about you can't do this, you can't say that publicly. If you say that publicly, you're fine. Anthony Davis got fined, I think, $100,000 or something like that for demanding a trade publicly. But you can say Andre Drummond is getting traded publicly, and we're looking to trade him publicly, and he's to stay professional and just deal with it. But then when Kyrie Irving say, oh, my mental health is off, everybody go crazy about that too. Do you not think that affects someone mentally? As much as we put into this game to be great, to come out here and be in shape, to produce for fans every single night, and most importantly, to help your team win, do you think that doesn't affect someone mentally? But as players, we're told to, no, you can't say that, you can't say this, but teams can. It goes along the same lines of when everyone wants to say, oh, man, that young guy can't figure it out. But no one wants to say the organization can't figure it out. At some point, the players must be respected in these situations, and it's ridiculous, and I'm sick of seeing it. Y'all have a great night. I'll see y'all tomorrow or Wednesday.
All right. Obviously, a lot to unpack there, but the big thing he talks about that ESPN highlighted from this as well on the tweet is the part where he says everyone wants to say that young man can't figure it out, but no one wants to say the organization can't figure it out. Go ahead.
Two things. One, the video was disconnecting so bad. I did not hear a lot of that, but I got the gist of it. And second thing is Draymond Green, when he retires from the NBA, should immediately go and try to be the president of the NBA Players Association, because he really, I know he's kind of like loud and stuff, but he gets it, man. He really understands, like you said, James Harden forced his way out, dogged his way for the last few games that he played in Houston, and everyone was like, but Andre Drummond, who is legitimately just like nowhere near James Harden caliber level of player, is like, hey, I want out, and then gets criticized. It's really sad. I do agree with Draymond on what should happen. And the quote is that no one wants to say the organization can't figure it out. And that is so true, because the Pistons, like the Knicks, all of those like really poor teams have had chances prior to be good for years, but they just don't. I don't get it.
Yeah. And to anybody, obviously we're not experts, right? We can only make opinions based on the information we have. But for anyone who would argue that the organization's decisions and the players' decisions are fundamentally different, I don't really know that they are, right? We talk about it all the time that from the organization perspective, obviously it is a business decision. It's pretty much all about the money versus the return on the investment. However, for the player, it's also a business decision. Do you want your brand, your playing mark, whatever you want to articulate that as, to be all over, a poor team, like a bad brand? And like he said, if you ask out from a poor situation, you're labeled as the bad guy. But if a team in a poor situation, or any team for that matter, says, hey, like we got to get rid of this person for no reason really other than the money, like they're not really a problem in the locker room, it's not like they're absolutely terrible. These guys are some of the best athletes in the world. That seems like a definite contradiction, to some extent, and I think Draymond has a good point.